Fairfield, Iowa, a small, sleepy town of less than 10,000 people, where people often leave their doors unlocked, where students call teachers by their first names and send handwritten birthday cards. Yet one day in the fall of 2021, this place became the scene of a shocking crime. A middle school teacher was found brutally murdered, her body hidden under a wheelbarrow and some old railroad tracks, right in the park where she used to walk every afternoon. The victim was Nohema Graber, 66 years old, a Spanish teacher, a pioneering female pilot in Mexico loved by hundreds of students. But the perpetrator was no stranger. Not some stranger who appeared and disappeared in the night, but two 16-year-old students who had sat in her class. A man who had a heated argument with her over an F from a school reunion to a deadly ambush. A detailed, cold-blooded murder plan that lasted weeks, with a motive that seemed too small to cost a life. So what happened? What drove two teenagers who had not yet graduated from high school to murder their former mentor with a baseball bat? And how did one of them think he would get away with it, until his best friend turned around and revealed everything on social media? On the afternoon of November 2, 2021, Ms. Nohema left school around 3:30 p.m. She drove to Chautauqua Park, as usual a quiet place, covered in fallen leaves and rustling with the sound of autumn wind, where she took a relaxing walk after each day of teaching. Her pickup truck was seen parked in the lot around 4 a.m., but just 45 minutes later, something strange happened. A witness saw two teenagers leave the lot in her car. A few hours later, a mutual friend picked them up after they had hidden the car in a secluded spot. Another witness said that around midnight, they saw a teenager pushing a wheelbarrow toward the park. The next morning, Nohema was nowhere to be seen. Friends began to worry. Although she often attended community meetings, she always announced her plans in advance. When the hours passed without any news, a friend called the police. The search began in the usual places: the school, her home, a friend's house, and finally the park. At first, the area seemed as peaceful as ever, but then the officers noticed a strange pile of trash off the trail. Someone had dumped it. But as they got closer, they saw Mrs. Nohema's body, beaten to death, with severe head and neck injuries hidden under a tarp, some railroad tracks, and an old wheelbarrow. She had not only been murdered, she had been dragged and buried in a hasty, cold manner. Around the town of Fairfield, fear spread through the school hallways. A model teacher, gentle, passionate about her job, murdered just after school by someone she had tried to help. The students were released early. The school was temporarily closed. The police had no idea what the motive was. Robbery, sexual assault, racism, any of it was possible, but no one believed it because the people here loved Mrs. Nohema. Fortunately, the first turning point came when a friend of Jeremy Goodell, one of the 16-year-olds, unexpectedly contacted the police. He had received several Snapchat messages from Jeremy, including exact details of Mrs. Nohema's death, some of which had never been made public. In one message, Jeremy bragged that he had killed his teacher. The police investigated quietly. Based on the description, they obtained a search warrant for Jeremy's home and found clothes matching the friend's description, along with blood, a suspected murder weapon, towels, and hair, all of which were sent for testing. Jeremy and Willard were questioned separately. Both gave evasive statements. They blamed each other. They said they were just lookouts and that some masked group were the killers. But eventually, pressure and evidence began to shake Willard Miller. He admitted that he had been at the park and that he had brought a wheelbarrow from his home. And most importantly, he admitted to plotting it with Jeremy out of anger over an F in Spanish. That was the reason for everything. A grade, an argument, a murder plan. Days after their arrest, both teens were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. Although they were only 16, they were both being tried as adults. If they had been tried in juvenile court, they could have been released at 18, meaning they would have spent less than 2 years in prison. But justice is not so easy. Fairfield residents gathered outside the high school auditorium, lighting candles in the dark. Candles swayed in the autumn wind, choked singing, and stories were told about the teacher with her kind smile and dedication. Yet somewhere in the crowd, fear crept in. "If students can do this, who can we trust?" said one resident. When Jeremy Goodale and Willard Miller were arrested, Fairfield residents still did not believe that two 16-year-olds could have committed such a shocking crime. But then the truth began to emerge, from Snapchat messages, fragmented confessions, to phone records, surveillance cameras, and physical evidence found at home. A grim, chilling picture weeks in the making was slowly painted, stroke by stroke of blood. After Jeremy's friend turned in the messages, investigators obtained search warrants for both teens' homes. At Jeremy's home, they found bloody clothing, the suspected murder weapon, towels, and several strands of hair that were collected for forensic testing. Phone records also showed that both boys were at the park at the time of the murder. But most striking was a half-confession. Willard Miller claimed that he had not done the killing, but had been present at the scene, brought the cart to the park, helped hide the body, and even covered up the evidence. He said he had been forced to say that a group of masked teens had killed the teacher and forced him to help. The plot was too flimsy to fool investigators. Jeremy was quieter. But the physical evidence from his home, combined with his social media bragging, made any defense sound hollow. The police determined this was not a spontaneous act. It was a planned murder, planned and monitored for at least 2 weeks. They followed the teacher's afternoon walks, chose the time of day when it was dark, brought baseball bats and body-hiding equipment. The two didn't just do it, they planned it. And in law, that's the premise of first-degree murder. Since both Jeremy and Willard were only 16, their lawyers immediately filed a motion to transfer the case to juvenile court. If successful, the two defendants could be released when they turned 18, meaning they could serve just 1-2 years, no matter how heinous the crime. But the prosecution was adamant. They argued that the killing was premeditated, the violence was particularly severe, and the defendants could not be rehabilitated in just a few short years. The judge agreed. The two were tried as adults and faced life in prison, although Iowa law still requires parole after 25-35 years because of their age. One of the strongest pieces of evidence was a series of Snapchat messages sent by Jeremy Goodale. He not only texted his friends about killing Ms. Graber, but also described in detail the plan, how they would track her, how they would hide her, and even bring the tools to the park. Some of the messages were sent just hours after the murder, before the body had been found. Police say it was a sense of complacency and arrogance that brought Jeremy out. Maybe he believed he was smart and would never get caught. Maybe he needed recognition. But in the end, social media was the #1 blood stain that led to their downfall. In April 2023, Jeremy Goodale unexpectedly pleaded guilty in court. In his testimony, he admitted everything. That Willard Miller was the planner, that they met at the park that day, that they both had baseball bats and other tools, and that they both took turns beating Graber to death. After Willard started, I dragged her off the trail together, then continued to beat her until she was no longer breathing, he said. We tried to clean up the scene, then came back late at night to bury the body more carefully. Cold, without hesitation. A chillingly clear confession, as if he were recounting a group assignment rather than a murder. The school had yet to fully recover. Many teachers were afraid to return to class. Students were traumatized, many requiring therapy. Fairfield police said they had never seen such a breakdown in trust in the community. Willard Miller also pleaded guilty not long after Jeremy. At his sentencing, he said, "I take full responsibility. I apologize to Mrs. Graber's family. I apologize for the pain and loss I have caused. But those apologies, do they matter when the price was an innocent life? A mother, a teacher, a role model in the community. In July 2023, Willard Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 35 years. A month later, Jeremy Goodell was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. The pair were also ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution to the victim's family, though it's doubtful they'll be able to pay it back during their time in prison. Nothing in the law can undo the loss of the Graber family, the judge said. But I hope this sentence serves as a reminder that evil, no matter who commits it, will be punished. The death of Nohema Graber was more than a criminal case. It was a deep breach in the community's trust in schools, a place where schools are supposed to be the safest place, where teachers are supposed to light the way for the next generation. Two teenagers, 16 years old, smart with not-so-special lives, turned into cold-blooded killers over a grade. Why? That's the question that still haunts hundreds of people in Fairfield. At the memorial service that followed the trial, handwritten letters from former students were brought out and placed in front of Graber's portrait. One student wrote, "She taught me Spanish, but more than anything, she taught me perseverance. I used to hate that subject, but she never gave up on me. She never gave up on anyone." Another letter, just a few lines long, made everyone choke up. She always said we can make mistakes as long as we know how to fix them. But she didn't have the chance to forgive this mistake anymore. When it came time for the victim's family to speak, many expected outrage, even curses, but instead they heard forgiveness. Mrs. Graber's son, standing across from Willard Miller, looked him straight in the eye and said, "I don't hate you. I've met your mother and we've had some honest conversations. I just hope that one day when you've paid your debt, you'll live a productive life to prove to your mother that she didn't raise a monster." It's not an easy forgiveness. It's something that's been squeezed out of pain, out of tears, out of sleepless nights, out of irreparable loss. But that's what makes it so powerful. Even though the sentence has been passed, Fairfield is still not the same. The Fairfield School Board has had to organize free counseling sessions for teachers and students. Police say many of the students are afraid to return to class, not because they're afraid the two teenagers will return, but because they can't understand why someone would hold a grudge against a teacher to the point of taking their own life. Fairfield's chief of security, Julie Kainella, once shared, "I've never seen students and teachers so panicked. They don't know who to trust. And it's sad to say this, but I'm not sure this town will ever be normal again." Born in Veracruz, Mexico, Nohema Graber was a flight attendant and one of her country's pioneering female pilots. After getting married, she moved to Iowa, a peaceful place but different in culture, language, and climate. But she not only adapted, but also became a symbol of kindness and dedication to the Latino community in Fairfield. She once shared, "As a woman, as an immigrant, as a Spanish speaker, I know I'm different. But that's why I want to help kids like me feel valued." She did. During more than a decade of teaching at Fairfield High School, she was loved by her students, respected by her colleagues, and trusted by her parents. Along with the loss and anger, the story of Nohema Graber's death also leaves a big question. What are we doing to our youth? Two teenagers with intelligence, full of learning conditions, thought that killing a teacher was a way to solve the problem of grades. Have we taught children to get good grades, forgetting about human qualities? Did the pressure to achieve, lack of emotional education, and gaps in family-school communication contribute to the tragedy? That is what makes many parents in Fairfield look back at themselves. Justice is not just years in prison. Justice, sometimes, is when those who stay do not let pain give rise to hatred, but turn it into a lesson, into action, so that no teacher has to die for doing her duty. Justice is when Mrs. Graber's son said in court, "My mother did not want to hate. I believe if she were alive, she would have chosen to forgive." Justice is when both teenagers face the truth, admit their mistakes, and begin to atone for their sins, not just with time, but by growing up, looking back, and making amends if given the chance. This is not a story with a happy ending. Mrs. Graber will never come back. Those two teenagers will grow old behind bars. And Fairfield will carry this scar forever. But if there is anything left from this case, it is faith in resilience, in the ability to forgive in the teachers who are still standing in class every day despite the risks, despite the pain. And if you are a student, parent, or teacher watching this video, remember, a grade is never greater than a human life. Respect, dialogue, and gratitude, sometimes that's all a relationship takes to keep a teacher-student. Thank you for following the story. If you find this case valuable, please leave a comment below, share your feelings, lessons, or gratitude for Ms. Graber. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on other touching and sobering cases.